Seltzer Kings
podcasts.
What does an 18-year veteran of the tech industry and a 20-year veteran of the military have in common? More than you might think. Welcome, everyone, to the Second Act podcast, leveling up your life's journey. Welcome back to the Second Act podcast with Michael and John. How you doing today, John?
I'm doing good, man. It was a good weekend. I'll tell you what, man, not to jump right into it, but you know, we're always talking about 1% better and working on just analyzing what we are always doing and always trying to improve. We in the Ballenger household implemented a OODA loop of our own family direction. Yeah, we got the kids together, my wife and I, we sat on the couch and we just had to analyze where we're going as a family, what we're doing, and make some adjustments so that our course is correctable. You know, if you wait too long, you get so far off course that you just have to start plotting a new course. And we didn't feel like we were that far off, but we had to make some corrections in our boys and in my wife and I's time. And it was really well received by everybody, and we ended up the weekend just having a great time. So it's cool to see the OODA loop in effect here at the household.
I love it. It applies in family life. It applies in, for sure, entrepreneurship. And
yeah,
I love it. We're amping it up this year, John. I got a couple of things to share before we get going with our awesome guest today. But
couple of surprises.
Well, first I want to give a shout out to our new members, Calvin, Brian, Eileen, Eric, Michael, Deb, Joe, and a person who wishes to remain anonymous, and I will honor that for them. But there's some more exciting announcements coming up soon. And, you know, we put all this work and love and energy into what we do. And it's always nice when we get unsolicited feedback from our guests and from folks saying that the stories we're sharing with our guests are giving them new perspectives and also making a difference, causing them to take action when maybe they hadn't in the past. So that's super special to hear stuff like that. And at least for me, and I'm sure for you, keeps me going in this journey.
Yeah, our last guest that we interviewed was a former convict.
Yes.
Came out of prison and just reinvented his life and is now thriving. And that I've talked about that with so many people since recording and over the weekend. It's been a really exciting conversation to share with other people. But you're right. Some of the stories we're hearing, and I think today's going to be no different, but they're exceptional and they're inspiring so many people. So yeah, I love it.
Absolutely. And last but not least on the announcement, so we've made some website updates, and our guest today is actually featured on our homepage at the bottom as part of our journey. If you go to www.michaelandjohn.com, because he is a very important part of this journey and how you and I came together, John. Without this individual, we would maybe have never met. So if anyone was wondering, our guest today is the person who made that happen.
That's right.
So with that said, I would like to introduce our guest. In this week's episode, we're joined by John Macaskill, former Navy SEAL commander turned mindfulness teacher and leadership coach. John's life started in South Africa, but his family moved to Louisiana when he was a small child. During his youth, he discovered his gift as a competitive student and athlete, eventually landing him at the Naval Academy. After graduating from the academy, John went on to serve in the Navy until 2020, with most of his time in the special operations community. Over the course of his naval career, John served in multiple highly dynamic leadership positions, from the battlefield to the operations center and the boardroom. Post-military career, John has pursued an entrepreneurial path fueled by his passion for helping people and organizations through mindfulness coaching, resilience training, and keynote speaking. I can personally attest to John as a coach. He is an amazing person to work with. John is also the co-host of a popular podcast called Men Talking Mindfulness, where they engage with a wide range of guests on how to break through barriers, foster resilience, and promote peace. There's a lot more to unpack between the three of us in today's show, so let's get to it. Welcome to the show, John.
Hey, thanks, fellas. So good to be here and so great to see you guys doing such great things together as a pair, a dynamic duo. So great to join you.
Man, I'm just excited to see you, John, because we live miles away from each other here in Colorado Springs, and between your career and your time going around speaking and all the things you're doing and me and, being in a sales role, our paths seem to never cross. But having you here today is truly an honor, and just seeing that smiling face, man, I am immediately reminded of the first time we met. We went to a Starbucks. I was new in town, and we got linked up somehow, but that conversation immediately went into some really deep topics, and I just appreciate who you are, both on your podcast, who you are on stage, who you are as a person, to really wrap me up and introduce me to a lot of people here in the Springs, and be kind of that integral person in my life here as I started in my transition 2 years ago. So, man, I just want to say thanks for that, and I'm excited to have you on today.
It's been an honor, man, and that's one of the things I thrive on is paying it forward, and then seeing those that I've paid it forward to continue that. So, and that's exactly what you guys are doing right here, right? I've had the honor of coaching Michael, and I'll be honest, I think those coaching sessions were as good for me as they were for Michael.
Yeah.
And I know that John, you and I have talked a lot in the past, sometimes in person, sometimes over the phone, sometimes just via text. But you guys are continuing to pay it forward, so love it. And again, honored to be here with y'all.
Well,
Awesome.
Man, we are honored to have you, and I'll get into it, because our time is limited, and you've got just a fantastic story, John. And so let's start where we usually start with all of our guests and go back to the beginning. So as Michael announced in the intro, you came from South Africa, you moved to Louisiana. Let's start there, learn a little bit more about your early life growing up in the Bayou State.
That's right.
I guess somewhat famous for the Saints and Mardi Gras, crawfish and muffaletta sandwiches.
So those are good.
Share
Muffalettas.
Muffalettas, sorry.
Yeah.
But give us some of the childhood moments that helped shape who you are today.
Yeah, so, going back to the beginning there, I'm not going to go into my birth and everything else, but from South Africa, I lived there until I was 7 years old. And, a couple of reasons that we left. One was South Africa in the 80s was still practicing apartheid, which, for those who aren't aware what that is, was the segregation. And specifically in South Africa, the white minority held anybody who was non-white down. Most of them there are black. So we didn't agree with that. I was 7 years old at the time, so I didn't really know whether to agree or not. It's just who the community culture that I was brought up in to that point. But my family, my parents didn't agree with that. And then additionally, South Africa was still practicing the draft. So my parents, this piece is a little funny, but they left South Africa to avoid the draft for myself and my younger brother. And then I came over here and years later voluntarily enlisted in the military.
Jeez.
But, the way that I always cover that is, at least I had a choice in the matter. So my younger brother did not go into the military. I did. I chose to, though. I wasn't told that I had to. So that was the difference. But, reversing or rewinding a little bit prior to that enlistment, I was a competitive athlete, and I was blessed with doing well in school. I don't know that was necessarily my own doing, but it had a lot to do with my parents, and I was surrounded by people who supported me, my three older sisters and my younger brother. So I was blessed there. I was a track and cross country runner, and my coach, he also supported me, not just athletically, but also academically. He pushed us to, if we didn't have certain grades, then we didn't compete. So, having that accountability within my my family, within the team, within my coach. That helped me a lot to develop my own azimuth, coming back to what you were talking about, John. If we get on path or if we get slightly off path, if you're off path just slightly for long enough, then you are end up in a completely different destination than what you had planned. Well, luckily I had people that kept nudging me back to a good path. And that did lead to my enlistment in the Navy. I tried to get into the Naval Academy out of high school, and I was rejected originally. And that hurt. Funny enough, like I targeted only one institution of higher learning, and that was the Naval Academy. I did not apply to West Point. I didn't apply to the Air Force Academy. And funny enough, I now live in the Air Force Academy's backyard here in Colorado Springs. But I didn't apply to either one of those. Not that they're bad institutions. I just wanted to be really badly be in the Navy. I wanted specifically to be a Navy SEAL. So I applied only to the Naval Academy. Got turned down, and then enlisted in the Navy because I thought, this is another path to the ultimate goal, and got picked up from the enlisted ranks with a Secretary of the Navy appointment to the Naval Academy. Graduated in the last peacetime class in 2001, and then we all know what happened a few months later, and I was in SEAL training at that point, and then the rest is history as far as the SEAL time. But now I live with my family here in Colorado Springs, my beautiful bride and 3 amazing children, and I do exactly what you mentioned. I teach mindfulness and meditation, which I'm sure we're going to get into how that came about, but that's the quick down and dirty.
So that's conviction and focus right there. Naval Academy or the Navy, no other options. Like, what was that about?
That's right.
Why was there no other consideration for anything else?
I don't know. I just had it, I decided sophomore year that I either wanted to be a naval aviator or I wanted to be a Navy SEAL. And both of those paths required me to be in the Navy, obviously. Although now, looking back, there have been some very highly successful SEALs who graduated from West Point or graduated from the Air Force Academy. They ended up choosing the Navy afterwards. Had I known that, I may have applied to those other lesser institutions.
Oh, yeah.
No, obviously I don't truly believe that, but any veteran who doesn't poke fun at the other services, I always have a little question in my mind. I'm like, were you truly in the service? Can you truly be trusted?
It's kind of expected, I guess, right?
So,
yeah. Okay.
It is expected. Yeah, for sure.
And did growing up by the water, both maybe in South Africa and also in Louisiana, did that influence? I mean, do you like to be in the water, be around water? Is that part of that reason?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely love it. Funny enough, I didn't grow up around the water too much in Louisiana. I grew up in the northern part of the state, in Ruston, which, if you're familiar with Louisiana at all, it's smack dab in between Shreveport and Monroe. On the I-20 corridor, not a whole lot there besides like Ruston Peaches and Louisiana Tech University. But it's always good to go back and visit my 3 sisters there, and my parents are still there. We spent summer vacations on the Gulf Coast. I loved the water. I was, Cape Town, South Africa is where I was born, so that was right on the water.
Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely had an affinity to being in the water. I was a lifeguard from my freshman year all the way through high school, and swam there at a lake in Louisiana, but it obviously wasn't the ocean. But yeah, that definitely had a play in it. I wanted to be on or around the water. Ironically, with as much training as I did in the SEAL teams, I spent less time in or around the water. I spent a lot of time in the desert. So
go figure. Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, right.
Cheers to spending time in the desert. I've got to ask, John, because Michael and I talk a lot about influences in our childhood. How much of an influence was Magnum PI on you as a kid?
I mean,
because I loved Magnum PI. I watched it every week, and
yes,
I thought I wanted to be a SEAL until that episode came out where he spent, 28 hours treading water, waiting for a rescue, and he kept getting bumped by sharks. And I was like, nope, not for me. So,
yeah, man. Actually, Magnum PI and James Bond both had a a lot to do with my becoming a SEAL, and the movie The Rock. But yeah, Magnum PI. I mean, he lived with Higgins, which was always questioned that relationship. I'm not sure what that was all about, but you know, he drove a Ferrari. He wore the short shorts and the Hawaiian shirts. Got to fly around with, what was it, TC with his helicopter. I'm sure TC played a big part in your being a helicopter pilot there, John.
Well,
is
you know,
that the
I
right
thought
name
if I
as a
can't,
TC?
if I couldn't be Magnum, you know, with that mustache, I was at least going to be somewhat like TC. I mean, granted, he was a black helicopter pilot. I'm white as can be, but man, yeah, that show was huge in my life. I obviously
loved it,
also watched a lot of others, but
and then James Bond, man. James Bond was a British naval commando, so I wanted to be him. And then the movie The Rock, which ironically all the SEALs get killed in, but I still wanted to be a special operator from when I was pretty young.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, so I got to know, John, you know, as you're going through, you know, high school and then going through the academy, you mentioned the desire to be a SEAL, but there's obviously different other paths. Did you ever think, I don't know if this is going to be the right fit, or I don't know if the SEAL community is really what I want to be a part of? Because for all the great things that they stand for, there's also a lot of difficulty getting in. And I know there's a lot of adversity. And I wanted to be a helicopter pilot, and I really struggled at some of the fundamentals in the basic training that I was going through. And I thought, man, maybe this just isn't the right direction. Maybe I'm missing something else that I need to be a part of. Did you ever come up against that opposition and it changed the way you thought about it? Or did you just plow through?
There was time at the Naval Academy, ironically, John, you're going to appreciate this. At the Naval Academy, in between junior and senior year, you get to spend some time, you know, out at sea or with the Marine Corps or with whomever. And I spent some time with the Marine Corps at what's called Leatherneck. And I have to tell you, at that point, running around and doing land navigation, shooting the machine guns, and spending time in like a bivouac with the fellow midshipmen who wanted to be Marines, I decided then that I was like, you know what? I want nothing to do with anything on the ground. I want, I want to fly. And then for some reason or another, during senior year, that switch got flipped in my mind, and I said, you know what? As difficult as that was, it was a lot of fun, and I want to be either a Navy SEAL or a Marine. And I put Navy SEAL as my number one choice. I put Marine Corps as my second choice. And a lot of the time, those who want to go into the Navy SEAL community put the Naval Surface Warfare Officer as their second choice. Because if they do, in fact, get their second choice and not get selected to go SEALs, then they can lateral transfer from the surface warfare community. And for those of you who are not familiar, surface warfare, they're the officers who are in charge of ships. Sometimes they actually have, the driving of the ship. They do the navigation, but we call them ship drivers. And I didn't want anything to do with that. I mean, that's an incredibly important job, but I didn't want anything to do with that. So I put Marine Corps second, and I went and interviewed for the Navy SEALs, the Navy SEAL community, which everybody does in choosing their service. And the Admiral SEAL who's sitting at my table kind of yelled at me. He's like, why would you not put surface warfare as your second choice? And I said, well, sir, when I leave the Naval Academy, I want to go and I want to start serving. I don't want to go into something else that may lead to my being a SEAL. I want to go and start serving. That could be as a Marine, and that could be as a SEAL, whatever it looks like. And I tell you, I got selected, one of 16 back then from the Naval Academy. Now I want to say it's up to like 30 something, but they selected 16 guys from the graduating class. All of us were really good friends. A lot of us had trained together. So as I was going through the Naval Academy, it was my number one choice for most of the time. Then when I was at Leatherneck, I said, okay, I want nothing to do with the ground. Then something switched. And then when I was actually at SEAL training, going through Hell Week, there was a big question in my mind. I'm like, oh man, have I really screwed up? Am I going to make it through this training? Is this something that I really want to do? And I remember I had a girlfriend for like my last 2 years at the Naval Academy. And when I chose Navy SEALs, we broke up. And I thought, you know what? She was pretty special in my life, who she was, and I gave up that relationship to go this way, so I'm going to power through. So in a roundabout way, my ex-girlfriend, I hope my wife doesn't listen to this. My wife now does not listen to this. But anyway, my ex-girlfriend at the time is, and giving up on that relationship helped to power me through into becoming a SEAL.
Well, it sounds like Hell Week had the intended effect of making you think about wanting to quit.
Absolutely, it
so
did.
that's good.
Yeah, man. Whenever I hear other SEALs talk about Hell Week, talk about buds, and 98% of them say, quitting was never an option. Quitting never crossed my mind. And can I cuss on this show?
Yeah, go for it.
I always think that's bullshit, man.
Yeah.
I'm like, man, there is no way you did not think about it. I think that everybody at some point or other questions themselves, questions their resolve. Yep. I thought about it. Now, I didn't think about it a whole lot, but I did think about it. There was definitely, I remember specifically exactly where I was. I was laying in the surf on Wednesday night, and one of the instructors was like, oh, it's only Tuesday night. And I'm like, oh shit, is it only Tuesday night? I'm like, man, if we're only 2 days into this, I am done. And that's when I questioned it. But yeah, I was able to power through, and lo and behold, here I am 20 something years later.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I love, John, to hear about your resolve. When I was thinking about going in the Marine Corps, I was sitting at my kitchen table and I laid down the pamphlets for marine aviation, and I'm looking at them. And my dad pokes his head over my shoulder and he said, what are you doing? And I told him, well, I'm thinking about joining the Marine Corps and becoming a pilot. And at the time, I had struggled really in school, not with the academics, but just really following basic rules. and I went to a small Christian school, and they had some, kind of ridiculous at the time rules that we had to follow. And I just couldn't do it out of just my own stubbornness and being a hard-nosed 20-year-old kid. And he said something that made me snap, and he said, yeah, we'll see how long that lasts.
Mm-hmm.
And right there, it was that moment, kind of like you described with your girlfriend, that was like, well, I think I'm going to just go ahead and push through and do this now. And ironically, I got into flight school, and like I said earlier, I was struggling to complete some of the basic things. And I thought, oh man, I told my dad I was going to do this. I have to finish. No matter what, comes against me and how hard this opposition is, I've got to finish. So I get that resolve. And it's amazing with you and a lot of our guests that we have on that have really made an impact. It's when they're presented with that, we'll see if that actually happens, moment. Yeah. Or somebody calling their bluff or calling them out where they say, you know what? No, I'm going to press through. And obviously you did it. So
yeah, man. And that brings up another memory is in boot camp, I raised my hand. I was like, yeah, I want to be a SEAL. And this other cat that was in boot camp with me was like, you can't be a SEAL. And I was like, why not? He's like, look at you. Because I was, 150 pounds soaking wet because I'd been this cross-country runner. And I took that as a personal challenge and absolutely powered through. Now, I also have to admit, and maybe we'll get into this later, and I think this only really became clear in the past few years after doing this mindfulness and meditation work and doing some deep introspective work. I think a piece of it also came down to insecurity and proving that I could do it, and then validating my existence. As shallow as that may sound, we all question, hey, why am I here? What could I do while I'm here to prove my validity for being here? And for right or wrong, better or worse, I chose being a special operator as that path, as that validation. So, and I'm sure I'm not the only one who has joined the military or joined something hard, tried to do something hard to prove to themselves that they can do it. Yes, I wanted to serve. I wanted to serve with some of the best men and women on the planet, and the SEAL community definitely has that. But I think there was also a piece of me that was like, you know what? I want to prove to myself that I can still do it.
Yeah. I think that's one of the core characteristics that separate people who will quit from those who will keep going on, is finding that intrinsic motivation versus extrinsic motivation. If you're relying on external factors for validation and sort of the feel good stuff to keep you going, those are sort of fleeting in nature. Whereas if it's intrinsically motivating you to do something, you want to prove the doubters wrong, but you also have to have that drive to keep going. But I want to come back to one thing, John. You said you interviewed to become a Navy SEAL. What is an interview to become a Navy SEAL? Like, just some of the basic. What are some of the questions that come up, if you can share for our audience?
Yeah, they're wild, man. So at the Naval Academy, again, you put your wish list of what job it is that you want to get when you leave, and you interview for each one of those, you interview for your top one. And, when you get to the Naval Academy as a freshman, there's like 200 dudes who are like, yeah, I want to be a SEAL. And then as the time goes on, you go through several wickets that kind of whittle that number down. And by the time you're a senior, there's like 50 guys who are still pretty hardcore. And of those 50, we all interview, and then you take a physical test, you do all these things. And then the interview we had at the time, he was going to be the development group commander soon. And I've got a story there too, so remind me to come back to that.
Okay.
So this guy, he's about to be, he was not an admiral at the time. He was a 06, so Navy captain, became an admiral later, but he's sitting at the end of the table. And then there's a couple other SEALs that work there at the Naval Academy who are on the interview board. And, they ask you, why do you want to be a SEAL? I mean, the standard stuff that you can imagine. And then they asked me, like I mentioned before, hey, why don't I have surface warfare as my second choice? And the captain at the time kind of yells at me. And then they ask you, if you could be any animal on the planet, what animal would you be?
Oh, interesting.
And I chose a dolphin. I said a dolphin, and they're like, okay, so why? And I was like, well, dolphins like the water. They always appear to be smiling, and sharks are scared of them. That's all. That was my whole rationale for why I wanted to be a dolphin.
That's the best.
And then there was this other cat. He said that he wanted to be a velociraptor, and I'm still friends with this guy now. But he went into this really odd explanation for why he wanted to be a velociraptor, and it was so odd that it offended this captain to the point where this guy had to write an apology letter to this Navy SEAL captain for why he explained that he wanted to be a velociraptor. And I won't get into the details on this, because hearing it back then, I was like, what were you thinking? Now, this guy has since become a highly successful explosive ordnance disposal officer, and since he's gotten out, and he's actually broken the world record for running a mile in the EOD outfit holding an egg and a spoon. So, I'm quite sure he's probably the only person ever to do that, but he holds a world record. So anyway, I got to come back to this Navy captain who took charge of the development group, which, for those of you who are not familiar with development group, it's like the top tier SEAL team. And
is that SEAL Team 6? Is that 6?
It is.
Yeah.
But I will never claim that I said that on the air.
Well, I think it's public knowledge.
Yeah,
I think if I know it,
it has become. Yeah, it has since become public knowledge. But anyhow, so this guy, now all 16 of us are selected, and we've become a pretty tight-knit group. He invites us to his change of command, which is down in Virginia Beach, and we drive down from Annapolis all in our whites, okay, our white uniforms, and we show up late to this change of command of the top tier SEAL team for a Navy captain, and we walk in, and all these Navy SEALs are there in uniform, and we walk in late, and we have our hats on, our covers, and they start yelling from the audience, "Take your covers off, you're inside." So we like take our covers off, and we look all flustered, and then they're like, "Put your cover on, there's a Navy SEAL captain on stage." And they just went back and forth, and we looked like this bunch of bumbling idiots. But they were just messing with us because, of course, they knew who we were. But man, it was one of the introductions to what the SEAL community was truly going to be like, which is, you know, a lot of hard training, a lot of grit and resilience and all those buzzwords that we're always hearing. But it's also a lot of fun and shenanigans. So
from the very beginning, they're messing with your mind more than anything.
Totally.
From the start,
Totally,
and then through I guess the course of your career, there's constant physical and mental.
I mean, to the point, Michael, where we used to, when this is no longer allowed because of all sorts of PC things, but when you used to check into a command, you would stand up in front of the whole command, and they would be like, "Hey, you know, this is John Macaskill. He's new to the command. Hey, John, tell us something about yourself." And you'd start to tell yourself, you'd start to say something, and then the whole team would be like, "Shut up! Nobody wants to hear it," like in front of everybody. And then inevitably there'd be like, "Hey, man, this guy's an officer. Show him some respect. Give him a chance." And so you'd be like, okay, I'll start again. And you'd start again and be like, "No, really, shut up. Nobody wants to hear it."
Oh, it's awful.
So, you know, but apparently that offended enough people to where we're not allowed to do that anymore. But man, it was good times.
Some of those memories, John, I love you talking about just the camaraderie that we have either in your unit, in a squadron. You know, we talk about on the show again how some pilots get the call signs, and it's usually not out of anything that we've done great.
Right.
But it's that time spent together that a lot of people don't realize is the glue that bonds us when things really, really get tough, when circumstances are not in our favor, and we're up against a lot of odds, or we're in a situation that we've only trained for, we haven't really actually done in real life. But those stories put such a smile on my face, and I love when I have military guests, when we have military guests on the show, and they start talking about that stuff, because it takes me back 15 years to some of those amazing relationships.
That brotherhood, and I say specifically brotherhood, is because in the SEAL teams, it's specifically men to this point. We've opened up training to women, and I'm sure in the coming years we're going to see our first female SEAL. But in the meantime, that brotherhood, that camaraderie is so tight. I still have text threads with my first platoon, second platoon guys, and we're still sharing stories about stupid quotes, stupid things that people did. I mean, some of the most ridiculous shit you've ever heard of. And we still get a kick out of it to this day, you know, 24, 23 years later. But yeah, there's definitely times I miss my first act, right? But I'm moving on to my second act, and I'm very proud of that transformation that I've been able to make into the second act, and it's been fun. But a lot of it, funny enough, I think stems from that first act. So yeah, it's definitely that camaraderie, that brotherhood.
It's interesting. Most of your time has been in the special forces, special operations community, where there's this incredibly high standard, high expectations, high level of execution for all the things that you do as a team and as an operator. So as you bring that to a close and enter your second act and enter the civilian world, that, you know, most people don't have that SEAL mindset or the special forces mindset and operate at those levels. Talk about how you have to adjust your own sort of thinking and mindset to deal with, what is like the real world of everyday people. When you're, whether it's a business partner or a friend or family member or your community, and move yourself away from that high intensity, high standard environment that you were in.
Yeah, I'm not sure I have. I think I'm still, I don't know why, I'm 4 years removed in August. I'll be 4 years removed. Yeah. And I still attack a lot of things with a lot of intensity. I mean, hell, talking about this past weekend, John, how you started the show off. This past weekend, I introduced my two oldest kids. So I've got 3 kids, a 7-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a soon-to-be 3-year-old, to geocaching. And I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with geocaching, but basically there's thousands of these little treasures all over the world that have geo coordinates associated with them, and people can go out and find these little treasures. And they're stupid little trinkets like a keychain or a coin or something dumb most of the time, but the kids love the hunt. And I very much enjoy the hunt too, as you can probably imagine. And I introduced them on Friday to like one thing. And from then I saw their joy in their face, and I'm like, okay, we're doing this the rest of the weekend. And like full on intensity. I mean, it was, you guys live right here, so it snowed this weekend. Yeah. And it was blowing wind. It was freezing cold. And I was like, I don't care. We're going. and they were gung-ho, man. They went full on. And to a point, there was one stupid little find that we could not find. And I was like, okay, guys, we're just going to come back. And my 5-year-old and my 7-year-old, my 5-year-old little boy and my 7-year-old little girl were like, no, Dad, we're not quitting. I was like, yes, you passed the test. We found it. We found it in the snow. But yeah, coming back, I don't know that I've necessarily transitioned from the hard charging mentality. I still, in a way, try to apply that to everything, with a little caveat in that I try to do that with, what I teach now is mindfulness and being present in the moment, being in the here and now. And sometimes I even tackle that with
the intensity.
Aggression. I'm going to crush this meditation. I'm going to be so mindful. I'm going to be the most mindful person on the planet. But yeah, I don't know that I have necessarily transitioned from that. And I don't think that was all from the SEAL teams. I think it was refined in the SEAL teams, but I think that's just been in my DNA, which was further refined from my coach in high school, as far as my track and cross country coach. Then, I played football and basketball and baseball in the earlier years, and those coaches refined me, which, is another conversation completely. But I feel that athletics really helps to define and refine grit and tenacity. Academic pursuits can also do that, but I really think athletics can have a big play in that, pushing yourself past your limits. But yeah, now I think I've gotten a little off track from the question. But bottom line is, I still have a lot of gung-ho in me, I believe.
There's some addictive aspects to that intensity. It feels good when you're charging hard and getting stuff done. Some people are just wired like that. But a lot of people are not wired like that, and that's sort of the yin and yang of life. And I will say, John, working with you a couple of years ago and learning about mindfulness and meditation and how the brain works and the STIA process, all the things that you sort of like introduced to me. Not that I could relate to the intensity of the SEAL community, but in the small worlds that I've lived in that are high performance, those tools were very helpful to just sort of recenter yourself and bring yourself to the present and look around at really what the important things are in life, which are sort of like an arm's length away from you most of the time.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, what we talked about in a lot of our coaching was the all or nothing mentality. And I've had that all or nothing mentality a lot, right? I've felt in my past that it's a light switch. Either it's on or it's off. If I'm not working out for 2.5 hours a day, then I'm not going to work out at all. If I'm not eating nothing but chicken and spinach, then I'm going to eat freaking everything, pizza and milkshakes. But as we know, it is not a light switch. It's a dial, and we can find that happy medium. But I still feel I have a pretty gung-ho dial. It's turned up.
As you speak about that tenacity and the 100%, I also, and maybe we'll get into it when you start talking about mindfulness, but I also think about some of the veterans that come back from serving for as long as they have, and they've been in that mentality for years, and now it plagues them because they can't turn it off.
Yeah.
And they can't go back to the way things used to be or the way things should be, because it's now become that's the new lifestyle for them. So, and I'm sure you see that in the SEAL community as well.
Oh yeah.
Guys that are deeply affected by that, inability to turn it off.
Absolutely. Like I said, I've seen it in my own lives. I've seen it in other people's lives, and that can cause hypervigilance. It can cause anxiety. It can cause stress. It can cause depression, which that has caused me, and still, even with my practices, I still find myself in those spots, having those challenges. Now, I don't define myself as any of those. I don't define myself as a depressed person. I don't define myself as a stressed person. I don't define myself with any of those. I say that I'm experiencing those things. I have a different relationship with all of them than I did before.
Sure.
But I absolutely do feel that service members who have that dial turned up a lot of the time and almost get it stuck, and they struggle to turn it back down, that can be a challenge for them in their professional lives. It can be a challenge for them in their personal lives. Again, coming back to my kids, right? I'm pushing them to and past their limits. But I also want to be a kind and caring and compassionate father. I don't want to be Commander Macaskill all the time, right? Sometimes, as Commander Macaskill, I had men and women that listened to my orders and obeyed my orders, and now I have 3 young children who definitely do not always obey. And that's like, why are you not listening to Commander Macaskill? Oh, because I'm not Commander Macaskill, I'm Dad.
Yeah.
And so there's definitely an adjustment there, a mentality shift, an emotional shift, a spiritual shift, that's absolutely important. And I find that the best way to make some of those shifts is through mindfulness.
So let's talk about your post-military life as an entrepreneur and some of the things you're doing. Blazing trails with mindfulness coaching, resilience training, keynote speaking. Share some of the exciting things that are going on with Frogman Mindfulness, Men Talking Mindfulness, and all the other cool stuff you got going on right now.
Yeah, so they're both taking off and going in several different directions. Some of them are supporting one another, and some of them are I won't say opposed, but different. So Men Talking Mindfulness is the podcast that I run with my co-hosts, Will Schneider in New York City, and we're about 4 years into that, which has been a journey. As you guys well know, the podcasting world is a journey. You learn something from the episodes that you do with your guests. You learn something from preparing for those episodes.
Yep.
We've had hundreds of guests on, and we've read dozens of books and learned so much, but we're growing that. We're being much more intentional. Like, we started just randomly on Instagram Live, and we've gotten into a podcast now, and we're watching our analytics, and we're watching where our growth is and what affects our growth. And again, Michael, I know this resonates with you as a data guy, right? But
we're blues, John. We're blues.
That's right. The blues. So, learning from all that and learning how to be intentional with that growth, that's fun. And then on the Frogman Mindfulness side, that's my speaking and coaching and workshop side, I am struggling under the weight of blessings. I've got a lot of work, and that is a good thing, but sometimes managing the schedule is difficult between those two things, between the podcast and my other work with Frogman Mindfulness, and then I've got another job that I'm working on in Dallas. And then obviously being a family man, right? I want to be a present father. I want to be a present husband. And sometimes I get, even with my practice of mindfulness and meditation, I get sucked into trying to do work when I'm at home with my kids. Luckily, they keep me in check. They're my accountability buddies.
Yeah.
They're like, hey, Dad, put that phone down, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's exciting, but it's challenging. The entrepreneurial journey has ups and downs, as we all know. You two know, and your listeners know, the entrepreneurial journey is just that, a journey full of ups and downs, challenges, wins and losses. The way that I just try to look at it is the losses, if you will, are learning opportunities. And as trite as that might sound, I feel that I'm growing from them. So it's a lot of fun. It's an adventure, and I'm highly unmanageable. So I think I have to be an entrepreneur, and I struggle to work for others. Like all I think about if I'm getting reprimanded by this 25-year-old kid is like, man, if you could see with the things that I've done and the people that I've led, and you're telling me about your MBA, I don't give a shit about your MBA. I love that you think it's great, and I appreciate and applaud you for going after it, but I've got some real leadership experience, not just something I learned about in class or a book.
Well, open up a little bit and tell our audience about some of the speaking that you've been doing, that process.
Yeah.
Because I started talking to you a year ago when that was just in its infancy, and I know that it's something that has to evolve. It has to be natural. It has to be something that's gripping to the audience, and how you kind of tailor your presentation to each of those audiences, much like you're prepping to go into a different phase of training or a different phase of combat. It's knowing who you are in front of. So just talk about that for a second.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, knowing your audience is critical to having your presentation land, just like knowing your product or your service or your niche market is critical to being an entrepreneur. I mean, you don't want to go out and, sell knives, which I'm fiddling around with here underneath the desk, but you don't want to go out and sell knives to a bunch of people who are anti-weapons, or you don't want to sell umbrellas, to people who are in an area where it never rains. So just like that, speaking on stage, I want to know my audience. I have made the mistake of, coming into an audience way too hard and talking, with the knife hand, the military knife hand, when, it was a bunch of old ladies. They don't want to be talked at. They want to be talked to. They want to be listened to. But yeah, I mean, I've gone through a lot of growth there. My speaking has changed a lot. The style, I still feel it's natural, but I've learned, how to connect with the audience. I went through the National Speakers Association, the Colorado chapter. They do a Speakers Academy, which is 6 months long, and it was huge for me in my growth and understanding what my audiences are looking for. I mean, my company used to be called Macaskill Consulting. I mean, how freaking original is that, right? And I went through this.
Original.
Went through.
There's only one.
I mean, the last name is somewhat original, but I mean, I was just like, I'm so lazy. I'm just gonna throw my last name and throw consulting behind it, which that's still my business. But now I'm doing business as Frogman Mindfulness, because they were talking about how important branding is. And I'll also say that I've had a lot of success based on the Seal brand. I don't want to say that I'm using the Seal brand, because that's not all I am. That's a piece of who I am.
Yep.
And the special operations community, we try to pride ourselves on being the silent professional. but it's also a credential that I have. I was a SEAL, and if I had my PhD, or if I was a doctor, you damn right it would say PhD or MD behind my name. Well, I'm a SEAL. Just like you're a Marine, John. You weren't a Marine. It's not something that was in your past. It's something that you are and always will be.
Yeah.
I went through training to become a SEAL. I feel that I am a SEAL and always will be. So yes, I touch on that, but I also feel that's something that gets me into the door. But once I'm through and I'm in the room, I better have something else to deliver. I better have more depth than that. So it's not lost on me that the SEAL brand is a piece of my success, but I also feel that the other things that I bring to the table once I'm sitting at the table are just as, if not more important.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, John. And Hollywood has been making the SEAL community famous since like the 80s. I think the movie Navy SEALs with Charlie Sheen maybe started it all. I don't remember.
Magnum PI. It was Magnum, man. Magnum.
But yeah, there's been, it's just been sort of a constant in the entertainment space, and that's helped elevate the brand. But like you said, it opens doors, just like an Ivy League degree opens doors. But once it gets through the door, you still got to prove yourself like anything else.
Right. Right.
And, John Ballenger has a super unique experience within the Marine Corps flying the president. That opens doors. But again, you still have to use these tools to prove yourself and prove that you can deliver value to that person, to those people that you're working with.
Right. Right.
Well, I'm sitting here listening to this. I think we've skipped over. I want to say one of the most interesting things about John and where he's at right now, and that's the mindfulness part, right? He said men talking mindfulness, and now he talks about mindfulness and meditation. But how does a Navy SEAL go from 100% all the time to mindfulness, which is got a very, I don't want to say passive, but a very help me out. What's
you can say passive works, or touchy feely, or
less intense.
Yeah, that's a great example. Less intense mindset to it. How did you come to the conclusion that you were this person and you're going to transition to this set of living?
Right. Well, it funny enough, I had it introduced to me as a practice to help me deal with my own mental health challenges. Again, I was struggling with anxiety. I was struggling with survivor's guilt, moral injury, you name it. And I got to a very dark spot in my life, and went out and sought counseling. And this one counselor, God bless him, he had enough gumption, if you will, to recommend mindfulness and meditation to me when I was struggling. And he recommended it to me, like I said, for my mental health challenges, but I didn't think that it would help with my mental health challenges. I was like, this is a bunch of hippy-dippy woo-woo stuff. And that's how it's perceived, right?
Yeah.
It's perceived as this soft practice, but in all actuality, it takes effort and discipline to do these things and to implement them into your life. But my first response was like, no way, doc, I'm not doing this weird stuff. And then he kind of switched things on me, switched the narrative. He's like, well, what if I could give you a pill that would change your performance? And as a type A personality special operator, we're always looking for something that's going to improve our performance. And this part sounds a little rehearsed because it's a part of my keynote speaking. But yeah, we're looking for an edge, right, over our enemy on the battlefield, or I'm looking for an edge. I'm looking for an edge over you two, right? I'm looking for an edge over my buddies. I'm looking for something that's going to put me ahead. And so as you can imagine, it wasn't a pill, it was mindfulness and meditation. So to be honest, I started it as a performance enhancement. And then the quote unquote byproducts or side effects, if you will, were that it also helped me to address these mental health challenges. And it changed my life so much that I attribute it to not only changing my life, but quite literally saving my life. And so, in the service, we have this duty and obligation to serve. Well, now I feel that it's my duty and obligation to continue to serve, just in a different capacity, and that's by paying it forward by sharing what mindfulness and meditation have done and continue to do for me in my life, personally and professionally. I think it's changed who I am with my wife and children. It's changed who I am as a friend. It's changed who I am as an entrepreneur. It changes my relationship with my own personal thoughts and feelings. So when I was looking at getting out, when I was looking at what my second act was going to be, I was looking at some bright and shiny objects. I was looking at getting my executive MBA or going back for my full MBA. And I got to put my caveat out there for anyone listening who has their MBA. I do applaud that. I just had one instance when I did have a 25-year-old guy straight out of school with his MBA trying to tell me about leadership. So I applaud you guys for getting that. But anyway, I was looking at all these bright and shiny objects, and then I was like, you know what? I'm going to go after this kind of non-traditional route, and it's been a blast. And I tell you, I think, Michael, you were talking at the very beginning about messages that you receive from your listeners. I received similar messages from my listeners of the podcast with me and Will. I received messages from social media followers, on LinkedIn. I get emails saying, you know what, and this is very, very true. I had a message come through on LinkedIn from a guy who was like, you know what, I had a gun in my lap today, and someone told me you need to listen to this guy's show and one particular episode, and they pointed them at, and I don't know what happened, but it saved him.
That's
at least
amazing.
in that moment. So yeah, I tell you, there's no amount of money that you can give me that is going to be that rewarding.
Yeah.
So it has been a blast. It is hugely rewarding, personally and professionally, what I'm doing now. So I am very thankful for the opportunity to do what I'm doing.
Yeah, and John, having your SEAL experience and talking about mindfulness and meditation and what maybe people perceive it as being in the way that you describe it, I know personally for me, you helped me cross the chasm and think about it differently as a practice. So I can personally attest to the information that you shared and the benefits it's had. I do it twice a day now, 20 minutes a day.
Nice.
And
there you go.
But I didn't start that right away. I looked at it as sort of like this tool to use periodically rather than make it part of my routine. And now it's part of my routine as of February 28th of this year and every day since. And I can tell you, just from a clarity of thinking, from like an inner peace, there's just like a number of factors that are just fascinating to me. And as someone who sort of likes to see the extremes, and in some cases experience the extremes, you want to see the polar opposite of what that is, and just to get back to center. So
right.
Yeah, so I'll just share, with our audience that it's been an amazing experience. So thank you.
Well, thank you, brother. I appreciate it, and I feel that we're on this journey together, man. It's not something that we ever arrive at. We don't arrive at being the perfect mindfulness practitioner. We don't arrive at being the perfect dad. We don't arrive at being the perfect entrepreneur. They're all journeys, and I'm just honored to be on this journey and watching you guys on yours.
And regardless of what you're doing or what you are preaching, and allowing people to see, it's also a part of reinventing that throughout your life and figuring out what is the perfect fit. I mean, just like I opened the show with, my two boys and my wife and I sat down on the couch and we said, what we've been doing isn't working. We've got to start doing something different. And, I spend a lot of time reading my Bible in the mornings, but sometimes I recognize that I've gotten into a rut, and I need to reinvent what I'm doing to make it exciting again, or to make it relevant, because it's constantly pushing yourself outside of comfort, because that's where the growth happens.
Absolutely.
Whether you're meditating or you're doing yoga or reading the Bible or spending time just reflecting on the day behind you and the day ahead of you, sometimes it just needs to be reinvigorated within you. And that sometimes just takes meeting somebody like you, John, to say, hey, have you tried tweaking it this way to make all the difference? And that's why coaches like yourself are so valuable. And hearing people talk about their experience and presenting what works for them can be so valuable. Reading books, again, so valuable in podcasts. And there's all these tools out there for people to find what works for them and what can make the difference for them. And you're out there hitting on a couple of those wickets, your book, your podcast, your coaching. So you're doing a lot of things for a lot of people, and that's very commendable, especially after your 24 years of service where you were also doing things for our country. So kudos to you.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate that. And, I appreciate that coming from a fellow service member. And I will say, again, as trite as this may sound, thank you for your time here and what you're doing now, but you also served in uniform. I don't want this to turn into full-on back and forth between John and John about what great service members we were, but also your listeners, right? You got other guests that you've had on, and then your listeners. Now here I am as a civilian. Yes, I'm a veteran, but I am a civilian, and I am very thankful for our men and women in uniform. And when I say men and women in uniform, it's not just military uniform, but our first responders,
Absolutely.
Our healthcare workers, our teachers. They may not wear a uniform, but damn it, they're superheroes in my eyes.
Yeah.
So I do want to give a quick shout out to all of them for the service that they are doing, services that they are doing to provide us with our ways of life.
Absolutely.
Yep. John, all our shows, I know we're running short on time, but we like to end with some practical advice or insights, just something for our audience who's contemplating or just getting started out in their second act in life. What do you want to leave them with today?
Yeah, I would tell them that even though I was talking about intensity before, I will tell you that nothing happens overnight. Don't expect to build your super successful business day one. Don't expect to transition from the military and be this super successful businessman or woman day one. It takes time, and you're going to have the times when you're knocked down. There's going to be times when you're seeming to fail, but those are opportunities to learn. But give yourself some time, give yourself some grace, and continue the good fight. That's about all I got.
Man. Well, John, Michael and I are both personally grateful that our paths crossed with yours, and I am proud to call you both a fellow resident of Colorado Springs, but also a friend. So thank you.
Thank you, man,
for sharing your journey with our audience, and for our listeners who are interested in what you're doing with Men Talking Mindfulness or Frogman Mindfulness and want to get in touch with you. What's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, the easiest way that I've found is just through a simple text. And you can text either the word mindful, MINDFUL, just one L, not mindful, but mindful, to 33777. That'll go to Frogman Mindfulness and everything that I'm involved with Frogman Mindfulness. Or you can text MTM, the letters MTM, to 33777, and that'll get you to everything involved with mine and Will's show, Men Talking Mindfulness.
It's awesome.
Nice.
We'll be sure to put those both on our show notes and up on our LinkedIn when this show is pushed out. So
thanks, fellas.
Yeah, thank you for coming on, and this was awesome.
You two have both been my coaches, and this was a special episode for me because you guys have been two influential men in my life. So thank you guys both, and it's just been an honor serving with you on this podcast and discussing life, even though I didn't have the privilege to serve with you in the armed forces. But thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you, brother.
John, thanks again, and great episode.
Yep.
Appreciate y'all. Thanks for having me on.
Yep. All right. See ya.
See ya.
The Second Act with Michael and John stars Michael Newborn and John Ballenger. The podcast is produced by Seltzer Kings. For more information on the show, check out michaelandjohn.com, or if you'd like to get involved in the conversation, give the guys a shout on their socials at The Second Act with Michael and John on most platforms. Thanks for listening.
Seltzer Kings.
Podcasts.